Good evening and welcome to St. John in the Wilderness. Thanks for tuning in tonight for Between the Trees. Just a reminder about why we call it Between the Trees, and you'll see that our guest tonight is actually between our two. They're actually not real trees. You probably figured that out. But there's a lot of reasons for that. But in the Bible, at the beginning in Genesis, there's the tree of life, and then in the book of Revelation, there's again a tree of life at the second coming, when God brings everything into fulfillment. But there's a whole lot that goes on between those two trees, and part of what goes on is in the Bible, and then part of what goes on are our lives of trying to live faithfully with God. So that's why we call it Between the Trees. And tonight we have David Moynak, who's with us. During the season of Lent, we've been looking at what our bishop calls practiced discipleship. And so we're looking at various aspects of what it means to be a disciple of Jesus and what that might mean. And we've looked at seeking and deciding and praying. And tonight we are looking at learning as a practice of a disciple, a follower of Jesus. And I'm just super pleased to have David with us. David teaches a lot of the classes here at St. John's. And so David, thank you and welcome to Between the Trees. Mm-hmm. So Dave, you tell us a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up? Tell us about your family, how you got to St. John's, that sort of thing.
Well, I actually was born in New York City, and my family lived there in Long Island for about 6 years, and then we moved to Western Pennsylvania, a town 25 miles north of Pittsburgh, when I was entering first grade. And that's mostly where I grew up.
Okay.
Was in a small town 25 miles north of Pittsburgh.
Okay. What was that like? Like growing up, it was a small town? It
was a small town called Moynak that was at the northernmost end of the Ohio River.
Okay.
A town of about 8,500 people. It's still a very small town. We occasionally would make trips into Pittsburgh, and that was a big deal.
Yeah.
And we attended a Catholic church, St. John the Baptist.
Okay.
I went to the grade school at St. John's. Then I went to a Catholic high school.
Huh.
I was the oldest of 7 children. And then at that time I was very interested in astronomy, and I chose to go to college in Houston because that's where NASA was, and I felt that's where the future lay.
Wow.
This was in the 1970s.
So where in Houston?
I attended Rice University.
Oh, yeah. I applied to Rice University when I was going to college, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
I got in there early decision, so that's the only place I applied. And I majored in physics at Rice, and then went into graduate school in astronomy at the University of Texas at Austin.
Okay.
Which is where I met my wife Linda, who was another graduate student at that time.
Oh, wow.
In virology.
Okay.
And then I made a decision to change my course in life and decided to apply to medical school.
Huh. So what was it that, it has nothing to do with what we're talking about tonight, but those big changes, why did you make that big change?
Well, I'm sure it's complicated, I'm sure, and I'm not even sure I'm aware of myself, everything that went into that decision, but
yeah.
I decided I wanted to do something in my life that was more closer to the reality of human life.
Something wow.
That was more intimate with human life as opposed to spending my passions on studying the stars.
Right, wow, okay.
So I went to medical school at the University of Texas at Houston, and MD Anderson was one of the places we did a lot of our rotations, and that got me interested in cancer care. So I did my specialty training in St. Louis, and then then after finishing my specialty training, was able to get a position at the University of Minnesota. And so we've been going progressively north.
I noticed that.
So we finally stopped.
Right. Okay. And you've been in Minnesota since then?
Since 1985.
Since 1985. So of the Northeast, well, you probably don't remember anything of New York, right?
Almost nothing.
Yeah. Okay, so small town, Pennsylvania, Houston, Texas, or Minneapolis, Minnesota. Which do you like the most?
They all have their charms. I mean,
Houston really has its charms. I'm showing my bias.
I mean, growing up in the foothills of the Appalachians and in Moynak,
yeah,
I was so astonished to go to Houston and see the flat lands in every direction.
Yeah.
And the sky in every direction.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. Just curiosity. In your graduating class, well, you went to a Catholic high school too?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
In your graduating class from a small town, do you remember about what percentage of the students went on to 4-year college or even a 2-year college?
The college, the high school I went to was a college prep high school.
Okay, so quite a
had
large
students
number.
from multiple counties.
Yeah,
for the surrounding multiple towns.
Okay, yeah, good. Okay, so still you have this interest in astronomy and the stars and what's out there.
I mean, I still do, at least in an armchair fashion, enjoy studying astronomy. I mean, the fascination there has always been that the world is, astronomy is a clear scientific sign that the world is not as it appears to us. The world is much deeper, much greater and awesome than that appears to what we see, with our eyes in our lives.
See, I always think that folks whose brains works like yours, and that's a big presumption that I'm making, but scientifically minded folk, that is opposed to a life of faith. That somebody who has studied physics and has devoted in much of your life to science, that somehow that's opposed to faith. But what you're saying is that they don't necessarily need to be in opposition.
I don't think so at all. In many ways, having studied some of the science of astronomy and physics and mathematics has helped me since I've gone into medicine, in the sense that if all you know is the science of what medicine tells us, terrible things, disease does terrible things to people. And if you're just looking at what the science of biology tells us about reality, in some ways that's a tougher science to reconcile with your faith.
Yeah.
Because of how it affects, because of how disease affects people.
Right.
Whereas if you understand the fact that the universe had a beginning, that it appears to have, things do not arise out of nothing. That the universe appears, the laws of physics appear to be fine-tuned to produce life. That at least is consistent with a God who has a purpose and a loving purpose for creation. And even though the things that happen to people in disease, the problem of evil and pain is always a difficult problem throughout our lives. I think what physics and astronomy and mathematics points to can help strengthen our faith.
Right.
That there is a creator who has a purpose.
Right. Do you still have a telescope?
I do, but unfortunately my house right now has trees that have grown and blossomed all around it. So I have to leave
You need to like build a tower or something on on top of your chimney or something. Build a tower.
Some trees, yes.
And probably the light, because you need to use a good telescope. Do you need to have? I mean, you have to have some good dark skies, right?
Oh, I mean, that definitely does help. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, in my brief stint in graduate study in astronomy, one of the most memorable things was going out to McDonald Observatory, where they have some of the darkest skies in America, and you could literally put your hand in front of you and not see it. It was so dark at night.
Wow.
And the Milky Way was brilliant. It was obvious.
Wow.
You didn't have to darken. I mean, it was so obvious.
Right.
But that's not something you'll see in the cities.
No, that is something we give up. Close to the cities. So how did you get to St. John's? So you were Catholic, you grew up Catholic. At some point you made the switch to the Episcopal Church.
I mean, in college I sort of, to some degree, lost my faith and became more of an agnostic, at least more of a seeker. And then I began reading, and one of the theologians I read was Paul Tillich. I'm not an expert in Tillich, but I was at that time I found it very helpful when he to use the language, to see the language that he used to try to explain God. For example, to speak of God as the ground of being or beyond being,
right? And
God not only as a personal agent, but also as the abyss, something that we could not, being that we could not ever fully comprehend.
Yeah.
Or to speak of faith as ultimate concern. So that helped me lead. So because Tillich was a Lutheran, that made me comfortable with Lutheranism, and that was helpful because my Linda, my wife, came from a Baptist background.
Right.
She was a moderate Baptist, and that was a time when the moderates were sort of leading the Southern Baptist Convention. So we both became Lutherans at that time. And what led, we both ultimately decided, we became somewhat uncomfortable with the Lutheran church we were going to, looking for alternatives. And St. John's was quite appealing at that time to both of us.
Yeah.
I mean, it had the liturgy. It had very welcoming.
Right.
And for me, I think the Episcopal Church has the strength of not being bound to one theologian like Luther or Calvin or Thomas Aquinas. It is open to all the theologies of both Western and even Eastern Christianity.
Yeah, and even the seeking that you were doing in college, I mean, that's part of what, I mean, I don't know you really well, David, but just in the classes that you offer here, they point to somebody who has continued to seek in his life, and I think that the Episcopal Church is good for folks who've decided they don't have all the answers, and that they want to keep seeking, keep asking questions, and keep looking for answers.
No, I agree completely. I mean, what unites us is our common worship.
Right. Right, yeah, we can ask all sorts of questions, right, yes. But we also have a book of common prayer that kind of glues us together, holds us together.
Yes.
Thank God, because we would be all over the place if sometimes we are, but we still, have our worship that holds us together. Yeah. So, okay, so you teach a lot of classes here at St. John's. Some of the ones that I've attended have been God in the Multiverse, and you taught one just a few weeks ago called Hard Questions and Possible Answers.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a good one. And then in 2 weeks, a little plug here, in 2 weeks, you're going to be starting one on evolution. Those are all pretty big things that we're not talking about kindergarten classes here. I mean, these are huge questions that you're dealing with and helping us to wrestle with some really big issues. Which makes me think you probably wrestle, in your own life, those are the questions that are going through your mind and your heart. I guess that's that's my question. Is that how it is? Or do you just go, I've got to teach a class in God in the Multiverse, so I better look some stuff up about that?
No, I think that, throughout our lives we are confronted with new information and new experiences, and we have to integrate that into our lives. And then assess, previous ideas and attitudes and see if it fits. And so if science tells us that the universe is this way, and that we have all evolved from common ancestors in the animal kingdom and even more primitive forms over millennia, somehow I have to integrate that information into my faith.
Right.
You could say that because all truth is Christian truth. That the early church fathers, I think Justin Martyr said that explicitly. All truth is Christian truth. Mm-hmm. What science tells us is, in some sense, a form of natural revelation.
Right.
And to some degree, it's telling us something about God that maybe we didn't know before.
Right.
So in talking about God in the multiverse, but that is, that in some ways that was a very compelling argument for God, because the universe is so fine-tuned for forming life that the only explanation, other than saying that there was a mind, that there was a God who deliberately designed a universe,
right,
to form life. The only alternative would be to say that there are multiple universes, most of which are sterile, and just by random chance one of them had the right laws of physics.
Right. And the chances of that happening are
extremely, well, it's not an explanation that should be very appealing, given the number of things you have to imagine as existing.
Right. Right.
And for evolution, the fact that we have that evolution is an established science, one of the things I think the Christian faith has failed to do in many ways is to come up with a theology, a consistent, systematic theology as to what is this telling us about God. Why would God choose to create through the process of evolution?
Right.
And what might that be telling us about the nature of God or God's purposes?
Right. Yeah, I think that we just stop at, there are those who say that that's not, they're faithful Christians who believe that that's not how God created. But I tend to be a Christian who believes that God creates through evolution. But you're right. The question, I think that for many of us, we stop right there and just say, well, God uses that process. And we don't take it a step further and say, what does that say about God? That God would use evolution rather than just a magic wand and
yes.
Right.
So in the series that's coming up on evolution, the goal would be to my goal, and I'm still studying and reading myself up on it now. There are theologians who have tried to explore what might this be telling us about God and God's purposes. The Jesuit theologian and geologist Teilhard de Chardin has probably done the most speculation on what this might mean, what it might mean that God chose to create the world through evolution and create life through evolution. Although he's hard to understand, he's more of a mystic in many ways.
Yeah. So are you reading Desjardins, or are you reading people who've who've translated Desjardins?
Well, I'm doing both.
Or doing both.
Yes.
Oh, good for you. How do you have time for this? I mean, because you're you're a practicing physician, and you have a busy life. So how do you have time? You probably don't watch TV.
Well, I occasionally to decompress, I'll watch stream something from Netflix or something.
Okay. But, that makes me feel so much better, David. Thank you. Yeah.
But working full time does cause some polarization in my life. That is, the weekdays I'm more involved just with working.
Yeah.
But on weekends I'm not on call. I do have time to pursue these other. To try to expand my life and read up on the next adult formation class.
Yeah. Is that a discipline that you've developed in your life, that you set aside time? I mean, we in college, you do that. You have to kind of set your schedule so that you're studying, doing those sorts of things. But I'm wondering, once we get out of college, we're not doing that anymore. Do you have like a regular discipline where you're reading and studying?
At times I have had a deliberate discipline and made up schedules and tried to keep to them, although most of the time something comes up and I get out of the habit. Having a class that I know I have to present, that creates a discipline right there.
Right. It's like the sermon. If I have to preach, it keeps me honest because I have to prepare for the sermon, and it's the same sort of thing. So, and you learn a lot. If you're teaching, you're a lot of times you're just trying to communicate what you're learning yourself. And
no, that's very true. Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was. There's something that I am wondering about, and it's that when we look at the characteristics of being a disciple, traditionally we'll look at things like prayer or obedience or things like that. But I'm just wondering about the importance of wonder and curiosity for a follower of Jesus. To me, it just seems like a really important thing to be curious in order to follow Jesus. One of our Eucharistic prayers says that open our eyes to see your hand, meaning God's hand, at work in the world about us. So basically that's saying help us to be observant of what you're doing out in the world. Help us to be curious about what's going on. I'm wondering if that is like that wonder and curiosity is an important part of your life of faith.
And it seems to me that is one of the reasons why God created us, to feel wonder and joy and astonishment in the world that God has created, as well as in the mental life and that people create. In poetry and music,
right?
The arts, all of that is unique to us as God's people, as human beings, and surely that is one of the reasons why God has made us to find wonder and joy in all of those aspects of our life.
I've got to think that. We know how to do worship in community, and our particular way of doing worship in community, our Episcopal way with the Book of Common Prayer. But I would think writing poetry and the arts and astronomy. That's a different but legitimate way of worshiping, of loving God, I would think. I mean, Jesus says that we're supposed to love God with our minds. And that seems to me like maybe what he's talking about. What do you think when you think of loving God with our minds, that commandment? What would that mean to you?
I think in a narrow sense, of course, I think that means that we should try to study and love Scripture and study the people who have witnessed, have spent their lives studying Scripture and can give us and witness to it and tell us what their thoughts are. That is books
Right.
about Scripture and theology. But I think it's also, in a broader sense, to love God with our minds and hearts is to appreciate all of the intellectual and artistic creations that uplift the human spirit and make us better people, because that's the whole purpose of God's giving us the gift of life.
Right. And I know that I see the wonder stick is moving in on us, but I have one more question because so for a smarty pants guy like you, I've heard that one of the longest journeys is from the head to the heart. And then also, I think, from the heart out into the hands. And I'm just wondering how personally your seeking and your process of learning in your life has affected your life as a Christian, as somebody who's chosen to follow in the way of Christ.
I think that, what you're describing is that the fact that often it is a challenge to find a true Christian spirituality, as to take our knowledge and thoughts and translate them into an authentic experience that we feel and live.
Right.
I think that being curious about the world and feeling wonder at the world is intellectually has pleasure and joy, but I think it also gives you pleasure and a sense of hope and joy, and that's more of a heart thing.
Yeah.
That's more of a sense of spirituality. Now, as to how that happens, I'm not sure. I'm not explicitly aware of how that process goes from mind to heart.
Right.
But I think both are present.
Yeah. I mean, Episcopalians, one of the things that happens is we stay in our minds a lot. And eventually, as followers of Jesus, it needs to get lived out in our lives. And I think that's what you're saying is, I mean, if you walk out on a dark night in West Texas, maybe, where the sky, I mean, just if it moves you, your knowledge moves you to that point of wonder and praise, actually,
Yes.
for the Creator, then that's the work of the Spirit, I would think, in our lives.
I agree, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, let's get some questions. Our high-tech wonder stick is coming in here.
It's 6 feet.
That's right, 6 feet. Okay, and I appreciate Jeff White, who is our tech guy tonight. And Jeff has terrible handwriting, but I can tell he's really tried to. It's better than it usually is, so he's really worked on trying to get it so it's legible. So, David, so I have no idea what these questions are, so we'll just go through them or who's asking them. But how has the COVID pandemic impacted your selection of teaching topics? And then also in parentheses, and thank you for your years of service, St. John's. And then I guess as a corollary, where do you see God in your practice, your medical practice?
I'm not sure that I can say that COVID has significantly impacted the topics I have chosen, for adult formation. It certainly has changed. I've had to think about how to present when it's going to be in a Zoom like or group
format, yeah.
Teams, or I deal with I can't remember what we use. Google
Meet.
Meet, right?
Yeah, right.
So that I've had to adjust things on that basis, but
right.
In the choice of topics, I'm not sure I've really addressed or chosen a topic that would actually relate to the challenges of COVID itself.
Yeah.
Which is a good idea, actually, perhaps.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly in the field I'm in medicine, I'm dealing with people who are facing a major event and challenge to their in their lives. It's not a simple medical problem. It's a problem that potentially threatens their lives, and that's one of the reasons why I chose to go into oncology, because I wanted to be a part of, at least peripherally, and help people in that circumstance of their lives.
It's you have such an interesting life. I mean, as big as it gets, and then as intimate and close as it gets as well. I mean, I'm not sure how you reconcile that or hold that together, because it's really the two ends of the spectrum.
Well, I mean, in many ways, every human being in many ways is almost a universe in themselves. I mean, there are things that we can see and discern and study and appreciate, but ultimately there are always unknowns.
Yeah, mystery.
There's things that we cannot fully reach or even comprehend or understand.
Yeah.
Just because of the nature of our limited ability to share.
Right. Yeah, God is mystery, and so are we, in a lot of ways. And I think of our jobs are to, who are you, God, and who am I? Those questions of seeking or exploring the mysteries, not only of God and the universe, but also what's going on inside of me as well. What's my place in this whole thing? Both are mysteries.
Yes, they are. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. How do you feel about SETI? S-E-T-I?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what S-E-T-I is.
Search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
Oh.
Is it worthwhile?
So S-E-T-I, search for extraterrestrial
intelligence. Yeah, like the movie Contact.
We should have you over here, Jeff, in this conversation. But David, so extraterrestrial. What do you think?
I don't think we know enough at this point in time about what is needed for life to develop, to know what the probability is of there being life that may have developed elsewhere in the universe, and how close it might be to us. I certainly can imagine that God might choose to create life elsewhere in the universe, not simply on Earth. It may also be that I would not say it's unreasonable to say that life could be so rare a phenomena that there may not be any other life within listening distance to us. As there may not be a Star Trek universe for us to discover.
Right. Yeah, Star Trek universe. Oh.
But certainly listening is I think it's something we should do, and it's certainly reasonable to. But I have no idea what the true probability is that there could be life elsewhere.
I find the recent Mars, what's the name of the one that they have on Mars right now? The
Perseverance.
This is Perseverance, yeah. That I was so excited about that. You know what was so fun to watch about the Perseverance was I love watching the people in the control booth. And they're like, as soon as the Perseverance landed, they're like,
yes.
Yeah, and they're all high-fiving. And then that lasts for about 10 seconds, and then they're back to work.
Yes.
So, but it's what I love about that is the sense that constant exploration and pushing the limits and questioning and not being satisfied with status quo. I love that.
I think that's one of the aspects of our humanity that God enjoys.
Oh, could you say more about that, David? That God enjoys our exploring and pushing the limits. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I mean, I think that in creating humanity, I'm not sure that God is. I think that God actually does take pleasure when we find joy, and when we feel a sense of wanting to explore and feel joy in discovery and have a eureka moment. I think those moments that are important to us are also events that are joyful in the life of God. I think God takes joy in our joy.
That's a beautiful thought. And I think that, when I think about the life of Jesus, he's constantly, in a different sort of way, but he had his limits, and he was constantly sort of pushing or stepping over those limits. And certainly we believe that, that's part of the way of Christ is to obey, certainly, but also to keep pushing those limits and find out what the limits of love are and the limits of life.
Yes.
Love and life. That's what Jesus is about, is love and life. And okay. Third question. We just have a couple more minutes. Oh, this is so interesting. What made you decide on being a radiation oncologist? I think you may have answered that a little bit, but.
Well, the fact that I happened to be in a medical school where we did a lot of rotations at a major cancer center, that either turned off medical students from cancer care, or it engendered some interest. And so for me, I found it interesting and important work. It also is a field that allowed me to use some of my background in physics, because in some ways, unlike most areas of medicine, physics is you might say, the pharmacology of radiation oncology. And it's the fundamentals, one of the fundamental sciences behind the treatment of how the machines work and treat a patient.
I hadn't really put that together, but yeah, that makes sense to me. Let's see. Do you think that medical miracles still happen?
I don't know. I would not put anything. I think God
I love
can do
that answer. I don't know. David Moynak says, I don't know. Wow. Okay, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Think God has the power to do whatever God desires. And certainly medical miracles, miracles that defy what we would expect in medicine, certainly I think are possible. I can't say that I have ever seen a medical miracle. I have treated people who felt they had a miraculous cure, but then because they were the one person out of 20 who survived, but I also saw the 19 other people who didn't.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, and that does take you down a tricky path of theology. When you have the one that does well, and that's a whole different conversation that we can have. But okay, we're almost out of time here because our other adult formation track. David usually is teaching in the Topics Unlimited track, which is on Sunday nights. But our other track is our Bible study, which is on tonight. It's Wednesday night starting at 6:45, and they're going through the book of Colossians right now. So we have to end. I just have one more question for you, David. So you're going to be retiring pretty quick, like in a few years.
About 2.5 years is my goal around when I turn 70.
So what are you going to do? Do you have plans for a retirement, or are you just going to sort of keep doing what you do, except without the going into work every day?
Well, I mean, there are a large number of books that I've already just they're on my list of things I want to pursue. I hope to move beyond just being an armchair amateur astronomer. But I haven't. Hopefully we'll be able to travel again.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. This has been really delightful and wonderful. Thank you for everything that you do at St. John's, teaching lots of classes. I get so much out of being a student in your classes, so I highly recommend folks. And in two weeks, David will start, after Easter. After Easter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we start, I think the Sunday after Easter is when the study on evolution begins on Sunday night. So thanks for all the time that you put into the classes that you teach. And also, David, I just want to say that I have gotten calls, as the rector here, I've gotten calls from professors who found the website. We have an adult formation website that has some of David's classes on it, and they've
there
wanted
are other people's classes on there too.
Oh, good. Okay. And they have wanted. It's a great website, but also they've wanted to track you down to ask some questions. So it's you've presented material that is encouraging other people to seek and to question. So I just really appreciate your life. So thank you. Thanks to all of you who have joined us tonight for Between the Trees. And one more in our series here. So this was on learning, and next week is on serving. And we're going to have Chris Harms, who put together Giving Gardens here in White Bear Lake. Chris is going to be our guest next week. So thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, the Bible study starts in 2 minutes, and you just go to the website and you can find the link to all our stuff there. So thanks again. God bless.